Now I'm going to follow up on something that you've said twice tonight. I'm not going to let this go. You've brought up DNA now and the medical aspects of this and the biological aspects. Is there, to your knowledge, are we in possession of extraterrestrial DNA?
I shouldn't be the one to answer that question. I would be guessing. I've heard the same things you've heard. I've spoken to doctors who thought that there was, in fact, the DNA. I don't know the answer. I don't know the real answer.
The real question is there DNA data in that database?
That's beyond my what I can talk about.
You know, I have to ask the question, Jacques.
Yes,
I mean, and I'm sure
they were biologists. We know who they are on the project. They would know whether they can answer the question reliably. Over the years, as you know, there has been a lot of interest in following up on cases where there were claims that DNA was available, but what I can tell you is, to my knowledge, in the San Antonio, in the Trinity case that Paola Harris and I have studied extensively, we did not have any biological material.
And would it surprise you that there is, you and I have heard the same stories, right? Alien bodies sent to Wright Pat, alien bodies sent to, and there must be, if some of these accounts are true, then there is DNA out there. Would it surprise you if this DNA evidence eventually surfaces and we are able to study that DNA?
That would not surprise me. No, people have looked at DNA in meteorites. I mean, that's material that comes from space. We pick it up. There have been papers that are still controversial from NASA biologists. At one time, I ran a project in venture capital that was actually sponsored by NASA, and we met with the biologists at NASA. I mean, they would, they obviously hope that they will find DNA or maybe even indirect evidence of DNA in a meteorite or in material from the moon or from Mars, which we're going to have. I mean, we have material from the moon. It's very unlikely that there would be DNA there, but in meteorites, why not?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And
if there has been an impact in, an asteroid or a planet somewhere that had developed life, like, even lichens or, primitive plant life, well, you would expect that some of the biological material would be something we could pick up that would not have been destroyed by the crash of that meteorite. So that's probably where we would find it first.
Would it surprise you if the analysis looks very similar to human DNA? Why would we expect it to be a whole lot different? You know what I mean? Because simple sugars and RNA have been found on meteorites that have crashed on Earth, right? And it would certainly suggest panspermia to some degree. But
when I talked to Dr. Colm Keller or some of the other doctors, on the project or at Stanford, I asked that question and I try to understand. I try to understand the answer. I think the answer they are giving is that you can argue that DNA is a very, very efficient process for building bodies, building beings that, walk around and think and do things. That doesn't mean that that's the only way the universe, or if you say, if you believe in God, that God has designed life, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Or that life has evolved. So the question is can we think of, and there are labs, of course, that are experimenting. I mean, we've got DNA with, the four basic molecules. You could add a fifth molecule and see what it does. There are people doing that. That's dangerous because we don't want to invent another form of life that we can't control. But you can do experiments, chemical experiments, and see what would work or might work, just so that if we ever encounter something like that, when we send people to Mars, for example, that we would be able to recognize it. So I think that's the purpose of the experiments that are being done today. It's fascinating science. It's not a science I practice, but I've worked with biologists on the computer side of what they do, and I begin to know how they think, and they certainly are thinking along the line of your question. Now, the universe is big enough also to have created other ways of developing life and probably intelligence, and we have to allow for intelligence that could be certainly smarter than we are. I hope it does. So it may be based on other forms of chemistry, or the elements would probably be similar. And there is something that I think we should clear up. You see, in the UFO literature, people say, well, if we found, iron or aluminum that had different ratios of isotopes, the isotopes are going to vary across the universe, but not by much. So we wouldn't expect to find something where the ratios are a little bit different and say, see, that's a proof that it comes from outer space. It would not be a proof. It would be interesting, but it would not be a final proof that the thing came from outer space.
Now, would I guess I'm going to ask this in a more direct fashion. You have always tried to present the case for an interdimensional ET civilization. If that is the case, then there wouldn't be a DNA. How would you extrapolate DNA from a light being? You know what I mean? That where it's not truly biological and it's not actually physical. A lot like the way that Steven Spielberg portrayed E.T. in the movie AI at the end, where it was a pure energy, had shape, you could see it, but there wasn't a physical aspect to it.
Well, you could imagine an intelligent plasma. People have done that. There are scientists who have written science fiction books, but based on real science. You could certainly imagine that, where we're going to design forms of maybe not intelligence, but certainly advanced thinking based on quantum computers and other devices that derive from computer technology. They wouldn't have DNA. There are other ways to allow them to evolve. that would be based on forms of logic. I mean, DNA is really a logical machine. So, and it's extraordinarily efficient because it knows how to avoid degrading, and being affected by errors and things like that. But it's getting to be recognizable as a logical process on top of a biological process, or really a biological process on top of a logical process. So yes, I think you're asking the right question. I mean, those things, but that will come from science. It's not going to come from UFOs. The idea, people have been shocked when I mentioned dimensions. I mean, I wrote that book, Dimensions, I think in 1980, so, that's probably beyond the age of most of the people who are listening to us now. So it's, but that comes from science. It comes from physics. Physics says there couldn't be just 3 dimensions plus 1 dimension of time, which doesn't even make sense because it only moves in one direction, and that we know that doesn't make too much sense. So there is something we're missing, and physicists have been looking at this and building hypotheses about other. I remember Dr. Hynek was teaching at Northwestern to his students that there could be another universe 5 minutes ahead of us. That's completely acceptable in modern science.
And,
I mean, you could. It's one of the possibilities that there's another universe in time, and there could be a tunnel. Now, my friends who are better in physics than I am say, well, slow down, Jacques. You couldn't get a spaceship through that tunnel. Well, that's what they say today, but. Maybe they say something different tomorrow.
If which would make total sense, and I agree with Dr. Hynek on that point. In that 5 seconds ahead, 5 minutes ahead, 5 seconds behind, and if that is the case, we would not be not only in that time scale, but in that frequency. And so physically, in any regard, we wouldn't know about it. We wouldn't see it. We wouldn't feel it. We wouldn't smell it. But it's right there, and it is around us at the exact same time. Would that solve some of the questions of these craft that just appear and disappear randomly for no reason?
Well, it would account better. And for years, people, including UFO researchers, civilian researchers, have thrown out the stories where the witness said, well, I saw a light, and it was an unusual light, and then there was sort of an explosion of light, and next thing you know, there was a spacecraft in my backyard. And I can show you the holes, where it made. Well, that's not crazy at all. And the place where it gets crazy is when things happen inside a house. And they go from the inside to the outside in ways we don't understand. And then, it's not just... Of course, if you can go partially through another dimension, you could do that. But that's not the theories that you will find, that even in the reports to the Pentagon, even in the reports from the BASS project, we didn't quite go that far. Although there were observations at the ranch that would, for many years before the project, under the projects that of NIDS and projects run by Mr. Bigelow's staff, where things like that happen.
Watch more podcast clips now on our YouTube channel. Go to Livewire Podcast Clips and watch more great podcast videos just like this one.